Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Convos with Anita Santiago podcast. I am your host, Anita Santiago. Please like, review, share, and subscribe to the podcast on all the major platforms. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me at convoscws@gmail.com. Don't forget the website, lifeconvos.com, to check out what's going on and keep up with all the latest news and happenings. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I wanted to take a minute to follow up on the episode I did last time, which was called Examining Our Relationship with Relationships. And in that episode, I asked the question, are relationships dead? And I kind of walk you through a historical perspective of relationships. And I asked the question, do we really believe that relationships are a good thing in our society? And if we do, then our actions and behaviors should show that. That podcast episode came about because several people had asked me to speak about the issue of dating and not being able to find the person that you want or the relationship that you want. And so I want to kind of expand on that topic a little bit to add just one more piece of the puzzle, if you will. When you get past the question, are relationships dead? Do we believe in relationships? Of course we do. But the next question is, how do we distinguish what we need versus what we want in relationships? And I think this is also a big area that influences whether or not people can find the relationships they're looking for. And if we don't take the time to evaluate what we need versus what we want, then it's more likely we're going to enter into relationships that just don't serve us well. So, with that being said, okay, what does it all mean? Where do we start? Well, let's start with this piece. You know, um, women and men have very different perspectives when it comes to relationships. I would argue that in the United States, or the West, that young men are typically socialized or taught as they're growing up to identify what it is they want out of life in a partner, in a marriage. And so as they develop, they seek that specific thing. I don't know if women have that same background or have that same experience. I feel that some women do, but a lot of women don't. And I think sometimes it can be harder for women to really identify what it is that they're looking for in a relationship. So, what we want versus what we need. Where do you get the criteria? How do you develop your criteria for relationships? And I would say that, the influences and how you build the criteria or the points that you're looking for in a relationship comes from multiple areas. First and foremost is your family environment, how you grew up. What were your family values? What was imparted or what was shared with you as far as family values are concerned. And a lot of times those values are integrated into what you want in a relationship. So if you saw very good, healthy, nurturing relationships, then it's going to be likely that that is a criteria for you going forward, as well as if you didn't see healthy, nurturing relationships, that might help you develop the criteria that you want those type of relationships going forward. I also feel that media and society plays a big part in how we develop what we want out of relationships. Media, television, movies has a big influence on what we perceive to be a good relationship or what we perceive to be the things that people should do in relationships. So if you look at movies, TV shows historically from maybe the 1950s forward, you can go back and see the representations of what relationships look like, either marriages or dating. There are a lot of TV shows that, uh, have those values as interwoven into the scripts. And you can see in the shows, if you look at Leave It to Beaver from the 60s, it's going to look very different than the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I mean, there, and you can see the evolution of how our perspectives on relationships have changed. And then there's your own personal experiences. So as you date and enter into relationships, go in and out of relationships, you refine, you build, you add on to the criteria that you have for relationships going forward. So that's how we kind of develop, what we say we want in a relationship. And we develop our list of things that are critical to us from these multiple areas. And that's what we use to evaluate whether the relationship that you're in is viable. The interesting part of this to me is distinguishing between what you may want and what you may need in a relationship. And what do I mean? I mentioned this in the other episode. There are so many podcasts, so many reels, and so many videos about what a man should do in a relationship, what a woman should do in a relationship, who should pay for what, how the money should be spent on either partner. And this is reinforced through, again, media shows, TV, family values, and those sort of things. For example, the whole dynamic about 50-50, the whole dynamic about um, who's contributing what in the relationship. Okay, so where did the concept of 50-50 come from? Um, is that absolutely necessary for you to have a viable relationship? I would say no. I would say the criteria that people must go 50-50 on anything is a want and not necessarily a need. I'm in some groups online, and the debate about what men should pay for where women are concerned is always a hot topic. It's always contentious. Should a man pay for a woman to get her hair done, her nails done, or whatever? And women sometimes strongly advocating that that is the case. Where does that come from? Um, how do you equate spending money as a tangible expression of care or love? And we know there's the five love languages, right? We know that for some people, gifts, acts of service are their love language, and that's how they process. So I would say for those folks that would probably be very important. But the more important part is, have you asked yourself why that is such a need or a want for you? Or is it just an expectation that you've picked up because society has said you should expect this? Society says that this is what we think you should expect out of relationships. And we can have that same conversation for men. Um, Men are often socialized to look for women that exhibit a certain representation of beauty, fitness, youth. Uh, is that something absolutely necessary to make a relationship work? Some men might say yes. But I would say, how did you develop that sense of this person with these features will lead to a successful relationship for you? I think as we go along in the experience of life, we just pick up things and we don't really know why we're so adamant about them and why we feel the way that we do about them. So if we have these wants, I want this in a relationship, I want that, I want a guy that's going to pay for everything, I want a girl that's youthful and fit. We may be creating expectations that are just not reasonable. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have standards. Of course, you should have standards. Everybody should have standards. But when I'm out and about and people are saying, "Hey, Anita, you need to talk about this on your podcast, or you need to cover this on your podcast because, you know, the dating pool is tainted, it's trash, it's just ridiculous out here." I understand what you're saying and I hear you. But I think if we really want to get to the bottom of why we're experiencing what we're experiencing, we have to do some self reflection, so that we understand why we are seeking the things that we're seeking. In the examples that I gave an example of a woman who wants a man that's going to buy everything and pay for everything for her. And I gave the example of a man that wants a woman that's youthful and fit and beautiful. Those things are what they want, but is it what they need? Maybe with the woman who wants the guy to pay for everything, she doesn't really want the man to pay for everything. Maybe what she really needs is a man who knows how to be financially stable so that she's not on this roller coasters of up and down, maybe having to help him out. With the man who wants the woman that's youthful and fit and beautiful, maybe what he wants is not really the woman that's youthful, beautiful, and fit, but maybe what he really needs is a woman that's willing to invest in herself, a woman that's willing to keep herself up, a woman that's going to always signal to him that she's doing her best to be her best. And I know that might be a little deep because I am a deep thinker, but honestly, the whole debate that we're having back and forth, screaming at each other, men, you need to do this, women, you need to do this, and we're not going to budge until you do this, and we're not going to budge until you do that. It's not getting us anywhere. People are literally pulling away from exploring the possibility of relationships because it's just so difficult. I think it's difficult sometimes because we have these expectations and we say, well, if these expectations can't be met, then I don't want any part of it. But I think if we could just step back a little bit and look at those expectations and ask ourselves, are these reasonable expectations? Are these expectations really indicators of something that I need on a deeper level? Something that's um, more complex than just a simple, I need you to pay to get my nails done, or I need you to look nice every time we go somewhere. We have to be very willing to step back and say, okay, these are the things that I want. So here's my list. I want someone honest. I want someone who communicates well. I want someone that does what they say that they're going to do. That's what I want. But what is it that you actually need? You know, the communication is what you want, but what you need is a relationship that's going to nurture communication. You want someone that's honest. What you may really need is an environment where two people participating in the relationship are encouraged to be honest at all times. So again, we may have to step back and say, I have these wants, but are they deeper? And do they lead me to identify the specific needs that I have in relationships? And listen, if you can't articulate that to yourself, if you can't make sense of that yourself, then when you get into a situation where you're exploring the possibility of entering a relationship with someone, how do you explain it to them? How do you say, you know, this is what I'm looking for. This is why I'm looking for it. What do you think? Is this something that do you think this relationship could be viable? Would you like to explore the possibility? the whole concept of getting into relationships and kind of hoping things happen, well, let's just see what happens. Eh, that's not very intentional. And I think most successful relationships have that element of being very intentional. The two people that are um, thinking about getting together are very intentional. They're very upfront. There's a lot of discussion about expectation and criteria and who's looking for what, because then you can quickly decide whether this is worth the time and effort that it's going to take to make it work. So again, we gotta pick this apart. We have to be very willing to do the type of reflection that says, hey, is what I want setting expectations that aren't realistic, or maybe they're not the real thing that I need, and the thing that I need is related to my want, but that thing that I need is deeper than what I just want. I feel like if you can work on that, then you're able to articulate to others what it is that you're really looking for. And maybe that changes the game for you. I know that this hostile environment of trying to convince men and women of what they should do is not working. Um, there's a lot of screaming on the internet. There's a lot of adversarial interchanges, and y'all need to do this, and y'all need to do that, and y'all need to stop doing this, and y'all need to stop doing that. It's not getting us anywhere. If the real goal is to have meaningful, nurturing, healthy, supportive relationships, then we have to be willing to do the work and understand ourselves in a way that's going to let us articulate that to others. And that's going to push us forward um, in relationships. And hey, these concepts don't, this is not just, you know, limited to romantic relationships, right? We have needs and wants in all of our relationships, family relationships, sibling relationships, co-worker relationships. You can take these principles and apply them there. We go to work hoping to have good relationships with our coworker, but are we intentional? Do we know what our expectations are? Do we know why we have those expectations? And are those expectations realistic? Do those expectations about our relationships with coworkers lead us to deeper needs that we may have? So this isn't just limited to romantic relationships, but I do feel like, enough people have approached me about the topic that, I wanted to offer a different perspective, something, um, a different way of looking at things, so that as you're going along this path of trying to determine whether or not you're going to make a serious go of a relationship, that you've thought it through, that you're doing the things and being the things that you want in that relationship, that you've looked at the expectations and the criteria you had, you've evaluated them, you know why you want them. And listen, there's no right and wrong. I can't tell anybody that their criteria and their expectations and their needs are wrong. We all have different things that we need. So it's not wrong. It's, can you articulate it to someone else? Can you clearly explain why these things are important to you so that the other person can understand? That's the critical part. It's not a right or wrong about what you need and want. It's, can you explain it to other people so that as you're evaluating whether or not you're going to get into a relationship, it's crystal clear to the other person. I hope that this has been helpful and thought provoking. The call to action for you, if you haven't done it, is to refine what you want and what you need in your relationships, and then be able to say that and go for it. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this topic. I'm your host, Anita Santiago. Catch the Convos with Anita Santiago on all the major platforms. Again, like, subscribe, share, and review. Until we meet again, happy listening.